In the annals of the Texas frontier, where blood and bravery forged legends, few names resonate as powerfully as John Coffey Jack Hays. By the fall of 1841, this young captain of the Texas Rangers had already carved his name into the lore of a land torn by relentless warfare between settlers and the indomitable Comanche nation. To explore one of Hays' most storied exploits, a desperate stand at Enchanted Rock, a granite monolith steeped in mystery and menace in the wilds of central Texas. Imagine October 1841 beneath a crisp autumn sky. Jack Hays crouches low behind a jagged outcrop of pink granite, his steady hands gripping a single-shot rifle. A Comanche warrior, painted for battle, charges up the rocky slope, his war cry piercing the stillness. Hays' dark eyes narrow with focus. He stands alone, cut off from his men, deep in a wilderness where mercy is rare. His ammunition is scarce, with perhaps a dozen rounds left in his powder horn and a pair of Colt revolvers at his hips. Every shot must strike true, for to miss risks a fate whispered in dread across the frontier. Capture by the Comanche, whose reputation for inventive cruelty chilled the hearts of even the boldest rangers. This moment at Enchanted Rock was no mere skirmish, but a crucible that tested the mettle of a man destined for legend. At just 24, Hays had arrived in Texas 5 years earlier, lured by tales of a new republic wresting independence from Mexico and survival from the Comanche. His fame as a fearless leader spread swiftly, not only among the rugged settlers of Austin and San Antonio, but also among the Comanche, who would later honor him with the name Captain Yak in grudging respect for his relentless courage. Enchanted Rock, soaring 425 feet above the Texas hill country, was no ordinary battlefield. To the Tonkawa and Comanche, it was a sacred site, a dwelling of spirits where the groans of fallen warriors were said to echo through the night. For Hays to hold his ground here was not just defiance, but a challenge to the very soul of the land's first peoples. Why did Hays face this peril alone? In 1841, the Republic of Texas, a fledgling state only 5 years old, was desperate to map its vast territories. Surveyors, guarded by rangers like Hays, ventured into the Comanche heartland to stake claims on land fiercely contested. These missions were deadly, with historical records suggesting nearly 1 in 3 surveyors perished in the hill country. Enchanted Rock, near modern-day Fredericksburg, was a flashpoint, its spiritual weight making any intrusion an act of provocation. Hays, tasked with protecting a small survey party, had ridden ahead to scout the terrain, unaware that keen eyes watched from the limestone ridges. His isolation was a rare misstep for a man renowned for tactical brilliance, setting the stage for a confrontation that would echo through history. This opening scene captures the raw essence of the Texas frontier, a clash of cultures, ambitions, and survival. Hays' stand at Enchanted Rock was more than one man's fight. It symbolized a young republic's struggle to assert itself against a people who had ruled the plains for centuries. As he steadied his rifle, Hays embodied the paradox of the ranger, a defender of progress, yet an intruder in a land not his own. What follows is a tale of courage, cunning, and an unbreakable will to endure, set in a world where every shadow held the promise of death. John Coffey Jack Hays knew the tales that haunted the Texas frontier. Rangers captured by the Comanche faced slow, agonizing deaths, their screams echoing as warnings to the living. Yet, as a painted warrior charged up the granite slope of Enchanted Rock, mere yards from his makeshift cover, Hays held his nerve. His single-shot rifle, a heavy Wesson percussion model, rested steady in his hands. He waited, heart pounding but mind clear, until the warrior's eyes locked with his own. Only then did he pull the trigger. The crack of gunpowder split the autumn air, and the Comanche stumbled, collapsing in a heap on the rocky ground, his war cry silenced forever. Hays exhaled, but relief was fleeting. That single shot, though true, had only ignited the battle of his life, a desperate struggle that would test the limits of his courage and cunning in the heart of Comanche territory. Hours earlier, on that crisp October afternoon in 1841, Hayes had ridden alongside a small band of surveyors, men tasked with an unenviable mission by the Republic of Texas. Their goal was to map the untamed Texas hill country, a land of rolling limestone ridges and oak-dotted valleys near what would later become Fredericksburg. Armed with chains, compasses, and fragile dreams of prosperity, these surveyors were etching boundaries on land the Comanche called their own, a provocation that rarely went unanswered. Historical accounts suggest that nearly 1 in 3 such expeditions met violent resistance, with entire parties vanishing into the wilderness. Hayes, at 24, already a seasoned Texas Ranger, was their shield, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon for signs of danger. Yet even he could not foresee the trap that awaited, one that would leave him isolated atop a sacred rock, fighting not just for his life, but for the fragile ambitions of a young republic. This fleeting moment of violence was no mere clash, but a spark in a broader fire. The Comanche, masters of the plains, saw surveyors as harbingers of dispossession, their measurements carving wounds into a homeland they had defended for generations. Hayes' shot, precise and lethal, was both a defiance and a declaration, a ranger's answer to a challenge issued in blood. Yet, as the echo of his rifle faded, he knew the true fight was only beginning. A test of endurance in a land where survival demanded more than skill. It demanded an unbreakable will to stand firm against the storm. In October 1841, a small band of surveyors ventured some 95 miles west of Austin, their chains and compasses poised to carve order from the untamed wilderness of central Texas. Their mission, ordered by the Republic of Texas, was deceptively simple: to measure and mark land grants, staking claims for a fledgling nation hungry for growth. Yet beneath this mundane task lay a truth that chilled the blood of even the boldest men. To unfurl a surveyor's chain in the Texas hill country was to court death, for this was no empty frontier. This was the domain of the Comanche, a people whose very name struck terror from the Rio Grande to the Red River. Central Texas in 1841 was a crucible of violence, arguably the most perilous frontier in North America. Historical records paint a grim picture. Between 1836 and 1845, Comanche raids claimed hundreds of lives, with survey parties a favored target. Armed with little more than rudimentary tools and guarded by a handful of Texas Rangers, these groups of 10 to 20 men faced odds that bordered on suicidal. The limestone ridges and oak-studded valleys of the hill country offered scant cover, their beauty masking a landscape where every rustle could herald an ambush. To the Comanche, known to themselves as the Numunu, meaning the people, these interlopers were not just trespassers but thieves, stealing a homeland forged through centuries of struggle and survival. The Comanche were no strangers to conflict. Their enemies, tribes like the Apache, Waco, Tawakoni, and Tonkawa, alongside countless smaller bands, knew them by a name that echoed their relentless spirit. Comanche, likely derived from a Ute term for those who fight us always, was less a label than a warning, whispered in dread across the plains. By 1841, the Numunu had transformed the Texas frontier into a battleground, their presence a constant reminder that this land answered to no flag, no treaty, no dream of empire. To survey here was to challenge their sovereignty, an act that invited swift and merciless retribution. This clash was more than a contest of arms. It was a collision of worlds. The Republic of Texas, barely 5 years old, saw the hill country as a canvas for expansion, its fertile valleys promising wealth and stability. The Comanche saw it as the heart of their existence, a tapestry of hunting grounds and sacred sites inseparable from their identity. Each surveyor's stake driven into the earth was a wound, each map a declaration of war. As the men under Jack Hayes's protection unrolled their chains near Enchanted Rock, they stepped unknowingly into the eye of this storm, their every move watched by a people who would defend their world to the last. The name Comanche carried a weight that silenced rooms, a word born from the Ute tongue, likely Comanche, meaning those who fight without end. It was a fitting title, bestowed by foes who learned its truth in blood. Yet the Comanche had not always been the terror of the plains. Centuries ago, they were a humble offshoot of the Shoshone, scraping a meager existence in the northern Rockies of Wyoming. There, amid granite peaks and aspen groves, they endured hunger and hardship, driven south around 1700 by stronger tribes like the Blackfeet. Their journey to the southern plains, spanning modern Texas and the Indian Territory, was one of survival, a saga of a people forged anew by adversity and an unlikely ally, the horse. When Spanish conquistadors first brought horses to the Americas in the 1500s, they guarded their secrets fiercely, aware that a mounted enemy could shatter their dominion. Yet no gate holds forever. By the early 1700s, through raids and trade with neighboring tribes, the Comanche acquired these strange, swift creatures in droves. Historical estimates suggest that by 1800, a single Comanche band might own hundreds of horses, with some families tending herds of 20 or more. The Apache had embraced the horse first, but the Comanche wove it into their soul. Their riders moved as if born to the saddle, mastering feats that baffled European observers, shooting arrows under galloping hooves, weaving through battle with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. This bond transformed them. Once the Comanche had wandered barren hills, digging for roots and scavenging scraps to survive. By the mid-1700s, they were lords of the buffalo hunt, their horses enabling them to track and fell the massive herds that roamed the plains. A single hunt could feed a band for weeks, with buffalo meat, hides, and bones sustaining a vibrant culture of mobility and trade. Their wealth was not in gold, but in horseflesh, with some estimates claiming the Comanche controlled over 100,000 horses by the early 1800s, more than any tribe in the Americas. Where they had once been mocked as weak, they now cast a shadow that stretched from the taverns of Santa Fe to the halls of Mexico City. By 1841, the Comanche had reshaped the frontier. Around 1750, they had driven the Apache from Texas, claiming the hill country as their own. Spanish missions faltered under their raids, French traders retreated, and Mexican settlements withered. Even the rising tide of American settlers pouring into the Republic of Texas found their dreams checked by a people who bowed to no empire. Smaller tribes like the Karankawa and Lipan vanished under their pressure, either absorbed or erased. The Comanche were not merely warriors, but architects of a vast domain, their power a testament to a truth as old as the plains themselves. Those who master change, master the world. This was no mere rise to power, but a revolution, one that made the Comanche the unchallenged rulers of the land Jack Hayes now dared to tread. Their story was not just of conquest, but of adaptation, a people who turned exile into empire through the thundering hooves of their horses. As surveyors' chains rattled near Enchanted Rock, they challenged not just a tribe, but a legacy, one that would answer with the fury of a storm. The Texas frontier was no stranger to violence. Its earth stained long before European boots touched its plains. Yet the Comanche waged war with a ferocity that carved their name into the nightmares of all who dared settle their land. Their raids were not rituals of honor, seeking trophies or glory like some tribes. Instead, they struck with chilling pragmatism, their only aim to shatter resistance and claim what they could. By 1841, a single Comanche band could unleash havoc that left entire settlements in ashes, their attacks so swift and brutal that survivors spoke of them as tempests of blood and flame. Historical accounts estimate hundreds of raids swept Texas each decade, each one a reminder that this was a people who answered to no one. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of European armies, Comanche warriors followed no fixed chain of command. Their war chiefs rose not by birth, but by persuasion, men who could rally dozens, sometimes hundreds, to their call with promises of plunder or vengeance. This fluidity made them unpredictable, their bands coalescing and dispersing like shadows. In battle, they shunned the ornate headdresses of later years, favoring caps crafted from fox pelts, crane feathers, or buffalo hide. Many painted their faces and bodies black, a hue they revered as the mark of death itself, a silent vow to their enemies. Under the glow of a full moon, when visibility favored their stealth, they struck with devastating precision. So feared were these nights that settlers across Texas dubbed them Comanche moons, locking doors and praying as the sky brightened, knowing entire families could vanish before dawn. This relentless warfare shaped not just the frontier, but the very birth of Texas itself. When Mexico governed these lands in the 1820s, its leaders saw the Comanche as an untamed scourge, too vast to subdue. Their solution was to invite American settlers, some 30,000 by 1836, to flood Texas from the east. These Anglo-immigrants promised land if they swore allegiance to Mexico and embraced Catholicism, were meant to form a human shield, absorbing the brunt of Comanche raids before they reached deeper into Mexican territory. The plan backfired. The settlers, hardened by their own struggles, fueled rebellion against Mexico, birthing the Republic of Texas in 1836. Yet the Comanche remained, an unyielding force that mocked borders and treaties alike. For every family that staked a claim, countless others paid in blood, their dreams of a new life extinguished in moments under a moonlit sky. The Comanche way of war was not mere violence, but a philosophy, rooted in survival and supremacy. Each raid was a statement, a refusal to yield the plains to outsiders. As Jack Hayes and his surveyors ventured near Enchanted Rock, they stepped into a world defined by this unforgiving code, where the cost of intrusion was measured not in words, but in lives. The clash that loomed was no accident, but the inevitable collision of two peoples, each fighting for a future only one could claim. The promise of land drew thousands to Texas, but for every dream sown in its soil, countless lives were reaped in blood. From the Rio Grande Valley to the fledgling outpost of Fort Worth, settlers, Mexican and Anglo alike, pressed forward through the 1830s, undeterred by the shadow of Comanche vengeance. Their settlements rose like fragile beacons, only to be snuffed out in moments by raids that left nothing but ashes and grief. Yet the Republic of Texas, born in 1836 and hungry for legitimacy, could not pause its ambitions. Even as war cries echoed across the plains, its leaders dispatched surveyors to map the frontier, their chains and compasses tasked with taming a land that answered only to its first masters. By 1841, small bands of 15 to 20 men fanned out across the Texas Hill Country, northwest of San Antonio and Austin, their logs detailing every ridge and river. These were no mere explorers, but agents of a new order, carving boundaries for a nation that existed more on paper than in reality. Historical records suggest that such missions faced dire odds, with nearly 1 in 3 parties attacked in the hill country's rugged expanse. The Comanche, lords of this domain, watched from cedar-covered hills, their eyes tracking every move. To them, each surveyor's stake was a theft, a brazen claim on hunting grounds and sacred places their people had defended for generations. Retribution was swift and merciless. Captured surveyors rarely met a quick end. Instead, they faced horrors etched into frontier lore, staked to the earth under a relentless sun, seared with burning coals, or flayed alive as warnings to others. Such fates, though not universal, were real enough to haunt every man who ventured west. Still, the call of Texas proved irresistible. After the Republic's bloody birth at battles like the Alamo and San Jacinto, a tide of young men flooded in from Virginia, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama. Between 1836 and 1845, some 10,000 to 15,000 arrived, drawn not just by promises of free land, often 640 acres for a single man, but by a hunger for adventure. Having missed the Revolution's glory, they saw in the surveyor's chain a chance to prove themselves, to carve their names into a land that devoured the timid. For these sons of the backwoods, the peril of Comanche arrows was not a deterrent, but a dare, a test of grit, in a world where courage was currency. This relentless push was no mere bureaucratic exercise, but a gamble with history. Each survey party challenged the Comanche's iron grip, their measurements a silent declaration of war. As Jack Hayes and his men tread near Enchanted Rock, they walked a razor's edge, their every step shadowed by a people whose vengeance knew no bounds. The clash that awaited was not just a skirmish, but a reckoning, a collision of futures where only the boldest would endure. Long before the first surveyor's chain rattled across its slopes, Enchanted Rock stood as a sentinel of the Texas hill country, its pink granite dome revered by the land's first peoples. Rising 425 feet above the earth, this ancient monolith was no mere landmark, but a sacred place, woven into the spiritual tapestry of tribes like the Tonkawa and Comanche. To them, it was a dwelling of restless spirits, where the moans of fallen warriors echoed in the night, carried by the strange groans of cooling stone, a phenomenon the Tonkawa attributed to otherworldly voices. Such beliefs made the rock a site of reverence, where offerings were laid and prayers whispered, though tales of human sacrifice remain more myth than truth, born of settler fears rather than recorded rites. Yet sanctity bred ferocity. Any outsider daring to tread near Enchanted Rock invited the wrath of its guardians. In 1841, as the Republic of Texas pushed to claim the hill country, such intrusions were not just risky, but profane, sparking swift retaliation from the Comanche, who saw each surveyor's mark as a desecration of their heritage. Historical accounts note that the area was a crucible of conflict, with native defenders striking to protect what they held dear. The peril was clear. To venture here was to court a violent end, a truth that hung heavy over every step taken in the shadow of the rock. Undaunted, a band of young surveyors, 15 to 20 strong, pressed forward. Fresh from the backwoods of Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, these men in their 20s carried the fire of ambition. Having missed the Revolution's glory at the Alamo, they came to Texas seeking not just land, often 640 acres for a single stake, but a chance to forge their legend. Their bravado was tempered by pragmatism. Far from reckless, they were among the frontier's best equipped, their belts heavy with Colt Patterson revolvers and Wesson rifles, tools of survival honed for the deadly dance of the Texas plains. Numbering among the Republic's boldest, they knew the risks, yet chose to challenge fate, driven by a hunger to claim a piece of a land that yielded nothing without a fight. This was no mere survey, but a defiance of the sacred, a bold stroke against a people whose roots ran deeper than any map. As John Coffee Hayes and his men neared Enchanted Rock, they stepped into a realm where earth and spirit intertwined, where every footprint risked awakening a fury older than the Republic itself. The stage was set not for a skirmish, but for a clash of worlds, where courage would meet consecration in a trial by fire. In the hands of the surveyors braving the Texas hill country, tools of war were as vital as their chains and compasses. Among them gleamed the Colt Patterson revolver, a .36 caliber marvel forged by Samuel Colt's genius in 1836. Born in Paterson, New Jersey, and refined from its original .28 caliber by 1837, this pistol was no mere weapon but a revolution. Its 5-shot cylinder, a stark contrast to the single-shot flintlocks of old, roared with a fury that echoed across the plains. Weighing nearly 3 pounds with a 9-inch barrel, it was a heavy, thunderous beast. Its report enough to freeze the blood of any Comanche warrior within its 65-yard range. Yet its power came at a cost. Reloading demanded patience, as fighters detached the cylinder, packed powder and ball by hand, and reassembled it under pressure, a clumsy dance in the heat of battle. Still, by 1841, hundreds of these revolvers armed the Republic's boldest, their design perfectly suited to the breakneck horseback clashes that defined the Texas frontier. For threats beyond the pistol's reach, the surveyors carried Wesson percussion rifles, their .42 caliber barrels a testament to American ingenuity. Unlike the temperamental flintlocks of decades past, these rifles ignited with a copper cap filled with mercuric fulminate, a spark that sent lead soaring up to 150 yards with lethal precision. Capable of 3 to 4 shots per minute, they outpaced their predecessors, offering a slim but critical edge in a land where seconds spelled survival. Each rifle, meticulously crafted, was a lifeline for men facing foes whose arrows flew as fast as their horses. Together, the Colt and Wesson armed the surveyors not just with firepower, but with defiance, a steel-wrought answer to the Comanche's unrelenting challenge. This arsenal arrived at a pivotal moment. As the Republic of Texas stretched its borders in 1841, its surveyors faced dangers that demanded more than courage. Their weapons, cutting edge for their time, leveled a battlefield where Comanche horsemen held every other advantage. Behind these tools stood a legacy forged by Stephen F. Austin, whose vision in the 1820s birthed the Texas Rangers, a band of rough riders now legendary for their grit. By 1841, this fledgling force, scarcely a decade old, had become the Republic's spearhead, guarding surveyors like John Coffee Hayes against a frontier that forgave no mistakes. Their rifles and revolvers were not just instruments of war, but symbols of a nation determined to carve its place, no matter the cost. As Hayes and his men ventured near Enchanted Rock, their weapons gleamed with purpose. Each revolver and rifle was a stake in the ground, a declaration that the Texas frontier would bend to their will. Yet in the shadow of that sacred stone, they faced a truth as old as the land itself. No weapon could fully tame a people fighting for their world. In the crucible of the Texas frontier, one force stood as a bulwark against chaos: the Texas Rangers. Their story began with Stephen F. Austin, the visionary statesman whose name graces the Republic's capital. In 1823, facing relentless threats from Comanche raiders and roving bandits, Austin called for a band of mounted men to shield his fledgling colony. These Texas mounted rifles, born of necessity, rode through prairies and river valleys, their presence a fragile promise of safety for settlers battered by violence. By 1805, as Texas broke free from Mexico, this rough-hewn militia was forged into a state-sanctioned force, blending military might with lawman's resolve. Numbering perhaps 100 to 200 by 1841, the Rangers excelled in the brutal art of close-quarter combat and relentless pursuit, their name synonymous with defiance in a land that bowed to no one. Their legend grew swiftly, carried on the wind from Texas's dusty hamlets to the polished salons of New York City, Boston, and Philadelphia. Tales of their daring, such as the 1840 victory at Plum Creek, where they repelled a Comanche war party, ignited imaginations far beyond the frontier. To settlers, they were guardians. To Mexicans, a formidable foe. To the Comanche, a rival worthy of grudging respect. By 1841, the Rangers stood as the Republic's only true shield against the bloodshed that haunted its plains and hills, their reputation a beacon in a world shadowed by fear. Among these hard men, one name shone brightest: John Coffee Jack Hayes. Born on January 28, 1817, in Little Cedar Lick, Tennessee, Hayes hailed from a family steeped in martial tradition. His father, Harmon A. Hayes, had fought under Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812, naming his son for Jackson's trusted general, John Coffee. At 19, drawn by tales of a new republic, Jack arrived in Texas in 1836, just as its revolution cooled. Joining the Rangers, he found his calling, his courage and cunning soon outpacing even the toughest of his peers. In a force of giants, where strength was measured in grit and nerve, Hayes emerged as a leader, revered and feared, his name whispered with awe by Texians and Comanche alike. This was no mere band of fighters, but a brotherhood forged in fire, their legacy rooted in Austin's dream and carried forward by men like Hayes. As they rode toward Enchanted Rock in 1841, they bore not just weapons, but a mantle of history, each step a challenge to a frontier that tested the limits of human will. The stage was set for a clash where legends would be made, and none stood taller than the Ranger who would face the storm. John Coffee Jack Hayes carried a name steeped in valor, bestowed by his father, Harmon A. Hayes, in honor of Andrew Jackson's trusted general, John Coffee. Born on January 28, 1817, in the rugged hills of Little Cedar Lick, Tennessee, Hayes was just 19 when the call of Texas drew him west in 1836. The Republic had won its freedom mere months before, but Hayes arrived too late for the battles of San Jacinto and the Alamo. Undeterred, he found his place among the Texas Rangers, a brotherhood where courage was forged in blood. By 1841, their ranks faced perils that claimed lives with grim regularity. Historical accounts suggest that Ranger patrols, often numbering fewer than 50, rode into Comanche territory knowing many would not return, their casualty rates at times rivaling the deadliest campaigns of the era. Yet in this unforgiving world, Hayes stood apart. At 24, he defied the mold of the Rangers' towering, battle-hardened men. Slender and standing only 5 feet 6 inches, with a boyish face and a quiet warmth, he seemed an unlikely hero. But his eyes told another story. Black, piercing, and unyielding, they held a focus that chilled friend and foe alike. Contemporaries marveled at his transformation. One moment, an affable young man swapping tales by a campfire. The next, a figure of unshakable resolve, his presence commanding even the wildest souls. Eyewitnesses swore that at the first hint of danger, Hayes became something more, a leader who thrived in the chaos of combat, his calm a beacon amid the storm. His reputation was no accident. By 1841, Hayes had carved his name into Texas lore with feats like the 1840 Battle of Plum Creek, where he helped rout a Comanche war party that threatened the heart of the Republic. At an age when most sought safety, he led men deemed ungovernable, taming their recklessness with a charisma born of instinct and iron will. From Austin's bustling streets to San Antonio's dusty trails, stories of his daring spread like wildfire, earning him awe among Texians and wary respect from the Comanche. This fame made him the Republic's choice to lead a perilous survey mission in the Texas Hill Country, where land grants hung in the balance. And so, on a crisp October afternoon in 1841, John Coffee Hayes found himself at Enchanted Rock. The granite dome loomed as both challenge and destiny, a sacred ground where the Republic's ambitions would collide with the Comanche's resolve. For Hayes, it was no mere assignment but a proving ground, a moment to etch his legend deeper into the frontier's unforgiving heart. On a crisp October afternoon in 1841, the survey team unrolled their steel chains across the Texas Hill Country, their maps slowly taking shape under the shadow of Enchanted Rock. John Coffee Jack Hayes, ever restless, spurred his horse toward the granite monolith, craving a closer look at its fabled slopes. Rising 425 feet above the rugged plains, the rock seemed a silent giant, its surface shimmering in the autumn light. Believing the area clear of danger, Hayes rode alone, his instincts dulled by the day's quiet. Yet the Comanche, masters of stealth, had been watching. Historical accounts suggest a band of 20 to 30 warriors, concealed among the limestone cliffs and oak-dotted hills, had trailed the surveyors for hours, their eyes locked on the Lone Ranger who now strayed from his companions. As Hayes neared the rock's base, a piercing war cry shattered the stillness, the sound ripping through the air like a thunderclap. Comanche warriors emerged from their cover, their shouts a chilling prelude to violence. Even a seasoned fighter like Hayes, honed by years on the frontier, must have felt his pulse surge. His mind, sharp as steel, calculated instantly. Retreat to his men, some half-mile away, was impossible. The Comanche would overtake him before he reached safety. With no choice but to stand his ground, he urged his horse to the rock's edge, dismounted, and scrambled up its steep face, each step a desperate bid for survival. His goal was clear, to claim the high ground, a vantage point where one man might defy a dozen. As J.W. Wilbarger later wrote in Indian Depredations in Texas, Hayes resolved to sell his life dearly, determined to make his foes pay a heavy price. The Comanche knew their quarry. Hayes, with his dark hair and wiry frame, was no ordinary foe, but a prize worth pursuing. Several warriors, perhaps 5 or 6, chased him up the rock, their arrows hissing with intent to claim his scalp. Yet Hayes reached a narrow crevice in the granite, a natural fortress barely wide enough for one man. There he crouched, his .42 caliber Wesson rifle trained on the slope below, twin Colt Patterson revolvers holstered at his sides. 10 shots waited in those pistols, each a fleeting chance to hold the line. The Wesson, powerful but slow, offered only 1 shot before a reload, a process too long for the chaos at hand. A lesser man might have panicked, firing wildly as arrows clattered against the stone, but Hayes, tempered by countless brushes with death, held steady. Historical records praise his restraint. He had seen comrades fall for hasty shots, their lives snuffed out by Comanche blades. Instead, he raised his rifle's barrel at each warrior who dared approach, his silent threat enough to stall their charge. For all their ferocity, the Comanche fought with caution, their strategy rooted in survival. Unlike armies bound by orders, they valued life over reckless glory, of a trait that shaped their every move. If a victory cost too many, they would withdraw to strike another day. Hayes knew this, and in that knowledge lay his hope. Alone, with only a single shot at the ready, he exploited their prudence, turning their strength into a fleeting shield. Yet the warriors grew restless, their patience fraying at this intruder defiling their sacred rock. As Wilbarger recounted, they steeled themselves for a fiercer assault, determined to end his defiance. The crack of Hayes's rifle broke the standoff, felling one warrior who crumpled lifeless on the granite slope. The Comanche froze, their voices rising in anguished calls to their fallen kin. Their advance halted as they sought cover among the stones. This was no mere skirmish, but a test of wills, where one man's cunning met a people's resolve. Enchanted Rock, silent witness to centuries, now bore scars of a new struggle, its slopes a stage for a drama that would echo through the frontier's heart. The air above Enchanted Rock grew heavy with sorrow as the Comanche realized their fallen warrior would rise no more. His lifeless form lay sprawled across the granite, a stark reminder of the cost of their assault. With piercing, wolf-like howls that echoed through the Texas hill country, they signaled retreat, their voices a haunting chorus of grief and resolve. As one, they withdrew to the rock's base, their moccasins silent on the stone. John Coffey Jack Hayes seized the fleeting pause, his hand steady despite the pounding of his heart. He reloaded his Wesson rifle, each motion precise, and checked his twin Colt Patterson revolvers, their 10 remaining shots a fragile lifeline against the storm he knew would return. The respite was brief. From the limestone cliffs and oak-shadowed hills, the Comanche surged again, their numbers, perhaps 20 to 30 strong, unleashed in a fiercer onslaught. Arrows fell like deadly rain, splintering against the narrow crevice where Hayes crouched, each one a whisper of death. Their war cries, sharp and chilling, filled the October sky, mingling with the soft tread of approaching footsteps. Hayes, ever the master of his nerve, waited. Historical accounts praise his discipline. He knew a single misstep could end him. As the warriors closed within 65 yards, their silhouettes stark against the granite, he rose at the last moment, his resolve hardened by the certainty of a final stand. With a swift draw, he unleashed one Colt Patterson, 5 shots tearing through the air in a deafening roar. The barrage halted the charge, forcing the Comanche to scatter for cover, their momentum broken by his defiance. Hayes sank back, his fingers racing to reload, bracing for a third assault he feared would be his last. But then, a sound sweeter than any victory broke the chaos. The crack of rifles and shouts of his comrades, some 15 to 20 Texians cutting through the distance. They had been locked in their own struggle against a larger Comanche band, perhaps 30 warriors strong, their fight hidden by the hills until Hayes's gunfire drew them to the rock. As recorded in Indian depredations in Texas, the sight of this advancing force shifted the tide. The Comanche, swift to measure their odds, gathered their wounded, and melted into the canyons and sagebrush of the hill country, leaving their fallen to the circling vultures and the victorious Texians. At the base of Enchanted Rock, Hayes reunited with his men, their faces etched with relief and resolve. Under a sharper watch, they resumed their survey the next day, their chains unrolling across a land now marked by blood and triumph. This clash was no mere skirmish, but a testament to one man's grit and a team's tenacity, a moment that would burnish the legend of the Texas Rangers in the unforgiving frontier. The clash at Enchanted Rock was but one chapter in the storied life of John Coffey Jack Hayes, a man whose courage would ripple through the annals of the frontier. In the years that followed, he led the Texas Rangers through countless trials, from relentless pursuits of Comanche raiders across the Texas plains to commanding valor in the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. At the Battle of Monterey, his Rangers charged through enemy lines, their ferocity turning the tide and cementing his name in military lore. By the late 1840s, the Comanche, masters of warfare who prized bravery above all, bestowed upon him titles of wary admiration. They called him Captain Yak, a nod to his unyielding spirit, and Bravo Too Much, a testament to a courage that even foes could not deny. In a culture where martial prowess defined honor, such respect for an enemy spoke volumes. Beyond the battlefield, Hayes wove a life rich with purpose. In 1847, he married Susan Calvert, the spirited daughter of a prominent hotelier in Seguin, Texas, their union a cornerstone of his new chapter. 2 years later, drawn by the siren call of opportunity, they joined some 80,000 dreamers flooding California in the gold rush of 1849. Gold eluded them, but Hayes's tenacity did not. He carved out success as a rancher and merchant, his acumen as sharp as his rifle. In 1850, the people of San Francisco chose him as their sheriff, a role he held until 1853, bringing order to a city teeming with ambition and chaos. That same year, as he cradled his newborn son, John Caperton Hayes, born in 1852, a curious parcel arrived at their California home. Wrapped within was a small golden spoon, its handle etched with the words, Buffalo Hump Jr., a gift from the legendary Comanche chief Buffalo Hump, whose name echoed across the plains. This gesture, steeped in the unwritten codes of the frontier, was no mere trinket. Historical accounts, though sparse, suggest it symbolized a rare bond of respect between adversaries, forged in the fires of conflict like that at Enchanted Rock. For Hayes, who had faced Buffalo Hump's warriors in battles spanning a decade, it was a quiet acknowledgment of a shared humanity. His life, from the granite slopes of Texas to the bustling streets of San Francisco, was not just a tale of survival, but of a legacy that transcended borders and enmities. As he stood at the dawn of a new era, Hayes carried the weight of a frontier he helped shape, his story a bridge between worlds in collision. As the dust of Enchanted Rock settled, John Coffey Jack Hayes carried its lessons into a life that would echo across the frontier's vast canvas. The Comanche chief Buffalo Hump, a formidable foe whose raids had once darkened Texas skies, sent a token of respect that spoke louder than war cries, a small golden spoon, its handle inscribed with Buffalo Hump Jr. for Hayes's newborn son. This gesture, woven into frontier lore, captured a truth as enduring as the granite it honored. Even in conflict, courage could forge bonds beyond the battlefield. On April 21, 1883, Hayes drew his final breath in Oakland, California, at the age of 66. Laid to rest in the quiet embrace of Mountain View Cemetery, he left behind a legacy that stretched from the Texas plains to the bustling streets of a growing West. By then, Oakland had blossomed into a thriving hub, its 34,000 residents a testament to the world Hayes helped shape. His life was no single tale but a tapestry of valor, resilience, and unrelenting spirit. From the clash at Enchanted Rock to the charge at Monterey, From the badge of San Francisco sheriff to the quiet toil of a California rancher, Hayes embodied the frontier's heart. Fearless yet measured, fierce yet revered. Historical records count nearly 25 years of his service with the Texas Rangers, a tenure that redefined what it meant to stand against the odds. Each chapter, brimming with heroism and steely resolve, could fill volumes, yet tonight we've glimpsed but one. The story of Enchanted Rock, where one man defied a tide, is a spark in the fire of his legend, a reminder of a time when will alone could carve history from stone.